Entrepreneurs aren't born, they're brewed. You are now listening to the Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Adam McChesney. Let's grow!
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your host, Adam McChesney, and I want to thank you for being here today. We are live from Half Coast Studios here in St. Louis, Missouri. Thank you to Half Coast for this amazing setup and for sponsoring the show. If you're looking to start your current podcast or take it to the next level, then you need to check these guys out. Contact them today for a free consultation. And if you're listening, please be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a 5-star review on both Apple and Spotify. We would love for you to share this on social media by tagging me, and this way we can get this incredible content out to more people. Today we have another great episode lined up for you. He and I have been connected on Facebook for over 2 years now and have a lot of the same interests and things like that when it comes to business. He's a serial entrepreneur. I'm excited to dive into his entrepreneur story. He's located in and around the San Antonio, Texas area. My guest today is Phil Reed. Phil is the owner and managing partner at Brickster Capital. Phil, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Adam.
Yeah, excited to dive into your story, man. I know we've been connected and kind of gone back and forth on social media now for over 2 years. I was just looking back at some of our stuff, so it's awesome to finally have a sit down with you, even though it's remote. But excited to have you on the show, man. I know you got a lot of exciting things going on, and so we'll kind of start there for our guests. We like to compare the entrepreneurial journey of each guest that we bring on to that of the beer brewing process, which is where we came up with Entrepreneur. So, Phil, if you kind of want to start us right where you're at right now, some of the things you got going on, and then we'll work our way backwards.
Yeah, so like Adam said, I'm the owner of Brickster Capital, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that later when we kind of describe what each organization does. But I also own a retail company called Tails Agogo, and it's a dog grooming company. I own a chemical distribution company that mainly supplies restaurants with cleaning supplies like degreasers. And I own another lending company, as well as a pest control company. So very busy, but mainly focused on the B2B lending consulting.
That's awesome, man. So yeah, it sounds like you got your hands in a little bit of everything, which is always good to have those types of guests here on the show, because the people that are listening to this show, whether or not they have multiple businesses, most of the time they're at least involved in different aspects and wearing multiple hats within inside their business. So I'm excited to dive here a little bit deeper. But as we're starting out with the history, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and then break down a little bit what each of those companies do.
Yeah, so I like to start these conversations with kind of a humorous story about myself that goes way back into elementary school, actually. And that's when I first got my taste for entrepreneurism. So when I was in the 5th grade, one of my teachers complained all the time about weight loss and how hard it was for her to lose weight and just struggling with that. And so me, being the tiny little entrepreneur, decided that I was going to make her plain, just raw, a weight loss product. And so what I ended up making her was a blend with baby powder, flour, and several other very inedible powders. And she drank it. Not a great first start. I got in a lot of trouble, but hey, I sold the product. She bought it. And then I definitely got written up from that.
That's awesome.
So that was a fun one. It continued on though in the middle school because I didn't learn my lesson there. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, well, some of them have rougher backgrounds where they started selling other things and they decided to take the straight path later on. Yeah, that happened to me too. So in middle school, I created a product that was mixed with Warheads, Gatorade powder, a ton of sugar, and everything sour and sugary I could possibly find. I ground it into a powder. It ended up being this fine white crystal looking stuff. I put it in small baggies. I brought it on my bus, and then I sold it and branded it as Happy Crack. That got me suspended.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
I learned my lesson there. Branding is important because if I just labeled it like Sugar Rush or something, it would have been fine. But no, I had to label it as crack and put it into small white baggies. So Big mistake. But that kind of was the start. That's where I knew I was interested in this stuff. I like providing products. I like providing solutions. I like connecting with consumers. And it really all started kind of then, where I knew I had that drive for it. But it wasn't really until college that I got my true taste for entrepreneurism. And that's where it started, was in sales. So I was studying biology and chemistry, and I had a goal of getting into pharmaceutical sales at that time. And there was a guy in my church back home that had owned a sales contracting business for a very long time. And so I asked him, I said, Phil, and his name was Phil too. Phil, how do I get into sales? I don't know anything about it, but I know I want to get into it for pharmaceutical because there's good money in it and it has long-term commitments, meaning I can stay in the same career for a really long time. And he simply said, well, Phil, come sell for me. And so I got my start in college, knocking doors for Comcast, selling cable, internet, and home phone, door to door, while going to college. And I did that for 3 years. And let me tell you, I learned a lot of lessons with a lot of slam doors in my face, a lot of people coming to the door with weapons, the cops getting called on me, being threatened. But I persisted. So I would say that, plus the wacky entrepreneurism in my earlier childhood, is really what got me into everything that I do today.
Man, that's a really cool and definitely interesting story. You know, we've had a lot of guests on that have talked about their past and things like that, but that's definitely a first, going all the way back to grade school and having this stuff. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's definitely a funny story. Why don't you, as we kind of talk about these different businesses before we get into more of your style and journey as an entrepreneur, kind of tell us a little bit about what each one of these businesses and kind of where you spend your time within them.
Yeah, for sure. So my history is in lending. Right out of college, or almost out of college, I got a job as an area manager with the lender. And from that position, it stemmed into my own brokerage. And so basically what it is now is 3 levels of service. One is very transactional. For example, if a company approaches me for a fuel card or a credit line or a term loan or an equipment loan, SBA loan, et cetera, we get the deal done for them, we package it, we get it completed, and then the transaction is completed as well. And they can come back to me whenever they want to, or they don't have to. It doesn't matter to me. Just the transaction is completed, and then we're done. And then we have 2 other levels of service, which is a credit building program, where we build their business credit completely from start to finish. And they walk away with having high business credit, meaning they don't have to PG all of their equipment loans, all of their fuel lines, all of their credit lines, and they have a lower cost of capital. So that's one of the service spaces that we have. And then finally, we have a CFO Level Program, where basically it's all of the above, where we handle all of the capital for them as well as the business credit building. But they retain us for a year, and we consult with them not only on the actual capital side of the business, but also making decisions. So for example, Phil, is it a good idea to add a salesperson? Does our forecasts allow us to? Do we have the cash flow for it? And we'll look at their P&Ls, we'll look at their cash flow and determine, well, yes, it is, or maybe no, it's not. Maybe you need to focus on sales as the owner. So that kind of encapsulates Brickster Capital, those 3 levels of service. So let's move on to the dog grooming. And that's super simple. We just groom dogs. So it's a company called Tails Agogo in Schertz, Texas. And we do, close to 150 dogs a week at this point. And I believe we're the fastest growing grooming company in Northeast San Antonio, if not all of San Antonio. And it's been a ton of fun. Like that business, I would say from just a pure fun standpoint, well above everything else, because we work with dogs. You know, what more fun is there to go into the office when all the staff are working and see a huge golden retriever just having a ton of fun and then playing with it? It's super enjoyable. And then lastly, we have the chemical distribution company, and that's pretty simple as well. So we very simply supply degreasers and oven cleaners and surface cleaners and sanitizers, mainly to restaurants, as well as to industrial people like warehouses and manufacturers. And we just provide solutions. So everything we do is non-hazardous. And with cleaning supplies, it's kind of a mess. Like there's some really nasty cleaning supplies out there that can burn your people and fume. And so when you have a non-hazardous derivative that works just as well, 1, it gets the EPA off your back. And then 2, your people are a lot safer. So That's mainly everything. And then the second lending company is mainly just other contracts that I've had in the past, and I'm maintaining those contracts. So it's not really interesting to talk about, to be honest with you.
Awesome, man. No, it sounds like you definitely got, some cool projects you're working on. Especially, I know you mentioned the Tails Agogo. Like that's obviously a fun one for you to get your hands into and things like that. With some of the stuff that we talk about on this show, we obviously want to get in a little bit deeper into understanding some of the things that have obviously made you successful, things that, you've seen in every business that you've been in, and kind of your journey as an entrepreneur. So we compare that to the ingredients with inside of the beer. So what are 3 things that have made you successful over your journey thus far?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that has helped me time and time again is being hyper empathetic and team centric, because any business is team driven. I can do consulting work myself. Like I could run a very, very small lending consulting agency and do X amount of deals per month. I could also groom dogs myself. I could also sell chemicals myself. But the problem is you can look at your time as almost like a pie, and you only have 12 or so hours of working hours a day. And if you're doing everything, you can't do anything. You're limiting yourself to a very small amount of market that you can actually capture. So understanding the team component of it is huge, because if you can't lead, and if you don't have empathy, and if you don't know how to lead people and to drive people to be super, super good versions of themselves, you won't succeed. So I can give you a couple examples of that. There's one lady that we work with that actually used to work with me at my first lending job, and I've been friends with her for several years. However, what happened was that she continued on the career as a lending professional within a company, within a lender, but then she got pregnant, and that lender pushed her out because no other reason than she was pregnant. And she requested time to work at home because it was difficult for her to go to the office. And stuff like that happens all the time. But with her, she was so excellent at what she did. It was just baffling to me. So we brought her on the team, and she has been an incredible partner in that business. And I say partner instead of team member or asset or employee, because that's what she is. She's not just an employee. And that's the mindset you have to carry if you want to be successful. It's every person on your team is a partner. Doesn't matter how small they are in the business. Doesn't matter if they're a janitor or someone that just cleans desks or something. They're a partner. And so we built her up now to the point that she is flourishing simply because we have not tied her down. We've allowed her to become the best version of herself and allowed her to drive herself while giving her goals, et cetera. And now we're giving her equity. And so very soon now, she will be a legitimate partner in the business with equity and be able to call herself an owner. And so that's the sort of stuff that I say that you have to be empathetic and you have to be team-centered. Otherwise, you're never going to grow. It's always just going to be you at the captain seat, and that's it. You're always going to be there. You're always going to be driving. You're always going to be parking. You're always going to be cleaning your car. You will be doing everything unless you are team-centric. So that's the first thing that I always tell everyone if they want to be successful. The second thing is equally as important, is having integrity. So I hold myself to a very, very high standard, and so do both of my partners. And that's extremely important, especially in the capital industry. Because the dirty secret in the lending industry is that if you are in a certain sector, mainly merchant cash advances, you can make $100,000 a month by yourself slinging those loans. But what they don't tell you is that those loans can cost upwards of 50% to the borrower, and the bankruptcy rate for the borrower is super stupid high. And so we don't do that. So we take a pay cut because we refuse to sacrifice our integrity just for a pay buck. And that's important because people see that long term. So yes, short term, you're going to take a pay cut. However, long term, everybody in the industry is going to see you, and all of your customers are going to see you as the guy that doesn't take shortcuts. So integrity, absolutely vital to a successful business. And then lastly, and this one is kind of hard to conceptualize because it's more of a nebulous idea, but sheer drive is so important with running a business and being successful. Because one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs don't talk about, and especially the gurus, like the coaches and stuff like that, they don't tell you how hard it is. So I'll give an example of myself and my wife. When we were starting Tails Agogo, I was also starting VO Global, which is my other loan company, while I was employed. I was working at a lender. They knew I was starting my brokerage. They were okay with it. And Shelby was also employed at a vet clinic. That means combined, we were working about 160 hours a week. Each of us were working 80 hours a week. And that's what it takes. Sometimes you just have to buckle down and do it. And a lot of people don't know that. And so we did that for 4 months, working 80 hours a week each for 4 months. And it was exhausting. However, that's what it took. Now we're successful because we put in those extremely long hours and had the drive to do it. So drive, you got to have drive. So I think those are my top three.
That's a great top three. And I appreciate the in-depthness of the reason behind it. Right. And,
Sure.
We've had a lot of people talk about team and culture and core values on here, but I've not heard anyone talk about, hey, like this is a partner within my company. And I'm sorry,
Right.
man, cough there. But as we look at that, like you have that buy-in from that employee, whether or not you mentioned you were giving them equity at some point, but the personal buy-in that employee has in your business and being a part of what you guys are doing is probably like something you can't put a dollar amount or a return on investment on, because that's the culture that you've built. So it's really cool to hear that. Right. And I don't think people take that serious enough. And so a great topic there. Definitely some key ingredients. The next aspect that we like to go through is the beer brewing process as a whole. So obviously, you talk about your journey as an entrepreneur. Obviously, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. So talk to us about some of the ups and the downs that you've had thus far.
Well, I'll actually start with the downs because I think that's more important than the ups, because you can't stand up until you fall flat on your face. I'm a very firm believer in that. So it all started in right after college, actually. So I graduated college with a degree in chemistry and biology with a promised job in Texas. And I went to college in Indiana. And so I had to uproot everything to move to Texas with a promised job. So I did that. And the job was going to be good. It was supposed to be $120,000 a year right out of college. Perfect for a young guy that's just getting into his career, like better than perfect. It was ideal. However, once I moved to Texas, the company said, well, actually, we need to get our ducks in a row. We can't hire you right now. So I moved all of my stuff, moved my wife, moved all of her stuff to Texas, no job, and I was flat on my face. So what ended up happening is I had to live with my in-laws, Shelby's parents, for about 6 months trying to figure out what the heck to do, because I couldn't do anything. I had no money. I was directly out of college. We only had probably $500 to our name. And so we couldn't get a rental. We couldn't get a house. We couldn't even get a trailer because we didn't have anything. And so that's how it all started. So you can imagine how difficult it was, like right when you're done with college, like whoop, right on your face. And that's how it started. So I bounced around jobs for about 6 months. I got a job in the environmental cleaning industry, and that didn't work out because there was a very, very nasty manager that just wouldn't let me sell and kept stealing my bids. And so that didn't work out. And then I sold solar for a little while. And because the company was pretty shady and had us lie to the customers, that didn't work out. And so it wasn't until about at the 6 months mark, I just got super frustrated. And so I put my resume on Indeed and applied to every single job I possibly can. Like, I'm not lying. I probably put in 200 to 300 applications to different companies. And I heard back from one. And in fact, the one I heard back from, I didn't even apply to. They found my resume on Indeed. And it was a company called Riviera Finance, and they took a shot on me. And so they made me area manager of San Antonio. And within about 6 months, I was one of the highest performing reps in the company. So they gave me South Texas, and I absorbed that territory. And after that, I absorbed West Texas. And then after that, I absorbed a little bit of North Texas. And then I decided to move companies because their rep agreement wasn't super strong. And because I was very successful in the industry already, I needed to move companies to a national manager position. So I did that. So I moved to a national manager position with a company called Millennium Funding. And so I basically handled all of United States sales. And I was a one-man show, so I wasn't managing a team, but I was managing all the territory. So that was a big step up for me. And it was around that time that I also started my loan brokerage for deals they couldn't handle. And then an incredible thing happened to me. And one of my partners, referral sources at the time, named David Pack, he brought an idea to me about e-commerce. And what we did at Millennium Funding was funding B2B invoices, is invoice factoring. So David asked me one day, he said, Amazon is a business, and there's vendors on Amazon that are also businesses that get paid by Amazon. Do you think you could fund those invoices? And I said, well, I don't know. Let me bring it to the ownership group. So I did. I pitched them. They said yes, and we built a product. And they moved the product to another company. And within about a year, David and I had built about a $15 to $20 million book of business that was making the company $400,000 to $500,000 a month. So incredible situation there. However, they did some kind of shady stuff. I had to leave, and then the business actually flopped. Not the lending, but not the e-commerce business, but their staffing side of their business. And so because their staffing side of their business flopped, they had to declare bankruptcy. So after building this incredible product, it just fell flat on its face, and I lost everything. I was making, I don't want to explain exactly how much I was making, but I was making an incredible amount of money per month. And within 2 months, all of it went away. All of my benefits, all of my income, all of my commission, all of my residuals, everything, just within 2 months. And so it was at that point that I had to decide if I was going to work for another lender or if I was going to work for myself. Because if I worked for another lender, the same thing could happen. I could piss somebody off on a bad day. Like if I said something wrong to the owner, even though it was perfectly fine, maybe the owner just had a bad day and bam, then I'm fired. I didn't want to do that again. So I decided that I was going to take that income hit and hold it, even though I was losing a ton of money per month, and focus on my own businesses. And so it was at that time that I said, no more working for someone else. I'm only going to work for me. And so I did. And it was within that period, about 2 years ago, that I started really rocketing forward with all of my stuff. And I decided that I couldn't do it alone anymore for VO Global. And so I ended up actually merging my company, realistically, with David Pack and Mark. And so that's how Brickster Capital was formed, was out of the sheer frustration of losing everything, and decided that I needed other people that had different levels of expertise than I do to build something better. So that kind of brings us to now, because right after that happened, I focused tremendously more on Tails Agogo, as well as the chemical company, as well as the brokerage. And it was within that little less than 2 year period that everything started scaling tremendously. And yeah, I took a massive hit for about 6 to 8 months, but now I'm making more than I ever have in my entire life, multiple times. And everything is very secure and the projections are very clear. And it was all because I decided that I wasn't going to take any more of the bullshit from other employers. I was going to be my own employer. So I think that's brings us really to the present. Like there was a ton of valleys. There was a ton of times where I just fell flat on my face and got super bloody and nasty. But overall, over time, it's really worked out.
No, I really appreciate you going in depth to the entire journey thus far and kind of walking through probably some of the nitty gritty. And like you mentioned, getting bloody, falling face first, losing everything in basically an instant, and having to get past that, but not just get past that and continue to do what you were already doing, right? It would have been a lot easier for you to go back to a situation similar to where you had been because it's comfortable. You kind of know what you're going to get, but you also leave it up to, like you said, you could get fired. So why would you want to do that? So I think it's really cool to hear that you made that transition, you bet on yourself, and you came out bigger and better times 10 on the other side. And so that part is awesome.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, man. No, this is exciting. So the next step in the entrepreneur process is that fermentation and conditioning. So part of the process within the beer where you wait to see the final result of what it tastes like and figure out what needs to be changed in order to get better. So what is one of the biggest lessons you have learned that you would share with someone that's an entrepreneur looking to save years worth of mistakes?
Yeah. And I'll share two, one brief one and one larger one that I thought about. But the main one for me has always been to trust God in everything. And I'm religious. I don't expect everyone to be religious, and I'll never push that on anyone. But for me, that's been a big part of it, because taking that leap with that trust, it mattered a lot to me. But the second part here is that it goes back to the people aspect of it, and that choosing your teams is vital. You can make or break an entire organization just based on the leadership team. And I've been through both sides of that. The reason why the lender imploded is because they had very bad leadership. They sacrificed I think an overall $50 million book of business because they had poor leadership from the top down. And that's across any business too. So in Tails Agogo, we do the same thing as I did with Brickster Capital. So there's a lady that I hired almost a year ago that everyone else would have passed up on. And the reason why is because she had spent the last 15 years or so in Mexico with her husband and her kid, with a very spotty resume, as well as no credit at all, no house of her own, no vehicle. She didn't even have wheels to work. But she said that she would walk to work. And so I thought, man, she has the experience, because she had a little bit of management experience, just a little bit. And she also has the admin experience of making sure things are rolling correctly. And if she's willing to walk to work, that's a 25-minute walk every day, at least, more like a 45-minute walk. If she's willing to do that, I need to take a shot on her. And so I did. And since I hired her, we have doubled in size. We have literally doubled in size. We have never been more organized and more smooth running than with this lady at the helm. And so I'm doing the exact same thing with her as I am with the other lady that we're hiring, or that we hired. In November, I'm giving her somewhere around 15% of the business, 10 to 15%, because I believe in her to be the operating owner of the company while I provide the vision. And so that's where it all comes down to. You have to have a very clean team, especially in leadership, because I've hired the wrong person to be a manager in Tails Agogo, and it almost tanked us. It literally almost bankrupted us. But now, because I have the right person at the helm managing the team underneath her, it's a flawlessly running business. And so think about that from almost a triangle, almost a scaling perspective, because the only way that you can run 4, 5, 6, a dozen, 2 dozen businesses is if you have a very strong team. Because the next step for me is not necessarily putting myself more involved in each of the businesses. It's hiring someone within my holdings company to manage those businesses as I provide higher level oversight and planning and training and leadership and mentoring for all the people on the teams. And so that matters so much. You cannot run a business without a very strong leadership team underneath you. So I would say without that, it's just not going to work.
No, that's an amazing lesson. And, we keep going back to the team, to the people, to hiring the right people. And so I assume that core values in things like that are very important with inside your business. I know we've talked about that before, but what are some of the things? I know you mentioned that this lady was willing to walk 25 or even 45 minutes. What are some things that you're looking for in these people that you're bringing on to be big aspects of it inside your organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it always goes back to character rather than specific skills, because I can teach skills. I can teach someone how to do QuickBooks, and if I don't know how to do it, I can pay for a course. I can teach someone how to do scheduling, or I can pay for a course. I can teach someone how to answer the phone, etc. But I cannot teach someone how to have strong drive. I cannot teach someone how to be honest. I can't teach someone how to have integrity. I can't. So the character behind the person is so much more important to me than their resume and their background their gender, all of that other stuff. It doesn't matter. If they're a good person and if they have drive, and I know I can trust them to, if they don't know how to do something, to figure it out, that's all I care about.
No, I love it. That's awesome. Character and drive. The last aspect here in the entrepreneur process is distribution. So where we're taking the beer to the market and selling it. So I know we talked about a lot of different things that you have going on, kind of where you're spending your time. I know you mentioned hiring more people within your holding company. So what is next for Phil? What are some exciting things that you have coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, so that's basically it. Building my holdings company to provide a little bit more oversight as far as what's next for me. What's next for Brickster is definitely getting our own line within about 12 months. We already have one queued up, and then we will be the lender. We'll also offer the other products, of course, and continue servicing those customers. But then we'll actually control the capital. And so we won't have to work with other lenders for some of the products that we work with. And that's going to provide tremendous amount of value to our customers, as well as increase our revenue as we're working with our customers without even affecting how much we cost to them. So very excited for that. With Tails Agogo, we just signed a lease for a building that's 3.5 times the size of ours and in a perfect location. I can't go into a lot of details because we haven't announced it just yet, but it is the perfect location. And I think that will once again quadruple the business. And if we can do that, I do believe that we will be the largest dog grooming business in San Antonio, even bigger than Petco, like each individual location of Petco. Yeah. Someday I hope to be able to say that I'm bigger than Petco, but not in the next couple of years or so, for sure. So that's it. Mainly with the holdings company and with Brickster, as well as Tails Agogo with the new location.
That's awesome, man. I'm excited to see you, over the next 2 years, as we've been connected for 2 years now, kind of see what that transition looks like. A lot of exciting things that you have coming in the pipe. But man, any last pieces of advice you'd like to leave with the audience before we head out today?
No, I think I really covered it. Just recapping that integrity and drive and character is the most important thing that you can do yourself, as well as your team. I think that trumps every single aspect of this.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree, and really appreciate you coming on here today. Where can people get connected with you, whether it's social media, a website? Where can they find more information about what it is that you do?
Yeah, for sure. So brickstercapital.com is where you would look for the lending company. And of course, I am on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. It's just Philip Reed with one L. And you'll see this face, a little bit less of a beard. Don't judge me for that. It was growing at that time. I'm still a man, okay? But Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Brickster Capital website are the best way to reach me.
Awesome. And we'll have all that in the show notes for you. Phil, thanks for coming on, man. Really had a great time.
Appreciate it, man. Talk to you soon.
And I want to thank you, the audience, for tuning in to today's podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, download, and share our content. Leaving a 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you again to Cfo Studios. If you're here in St. Louis and looking to start your own podcast or take your current one to the next level, then you seriously need to come check out what they have going on here. We'll see you all next week. And remember, entrepreneurs aren't born, they are brewed.
I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs aren't born, they're brewed. Thank you for listening to Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Adam McChesney.